The 1980s were an amazing time to be a kid. I myself, born in 1982, spent all of my young life just wondering at the sights around me, and none more so than the Book of Dreams, otherwise known as the Argos catalogue. Now I'm an eBay reseller in my early to late 30s. I still find myself in awe every single time that I manage to find figures that I loved as a kid. In this video, I'll be taking a look back at 5 of some of my most loved action figure lines when I was a kid in the 1980s, and giving you a brief history on how they almost never came about at all. As always, please comment on this video and share your experiences of the 1980s and the figures and toys that you loved as a kid. So with that being said, let's get straight into the list, and the first one is Masters of the Universe.
Now you can imagine all the power in the universe. The Masters of the Universe collection. 23 pieces, each sold separately. There's He-Man and these heroic action figures. Skeletor and the Warriors of Evil, and 4 fighting creatures. Castle Grayskull, Point Dread, and the Talon Fighter. You put them together. And battle machines like the Attack Track, batteries not included. What would you do with all the power in the universe?
This was a franchise that seemed to absolutely dominate the 1980s. However, it's hard to believe that the figure line almost never actually happened at all. Back in the late 1970s, the CEO of Mattel, Ray Wagner, turned down an opportunity to make action figures for an up-and-coming sci-fi flick. Now, that movie you may have heard of, it's called Star Wars. George Lucas, after hearing the rejection, decided to go with his second choice of Kenner. Now, 40 years later, $10 billion in revenue made just on the figures alone, and the rest is kind of history.
Well, that was a long time ago. I'm sure he's forgotten about that.
But seeing the success of Star Wars and having a few failed figure lines of their own, Ray Wagner decided that they needed a change. They needed something big. Wagner decided to run with a character concept that he was shown during the Mattel product conference. The concept itself was just a drawing of a barbarian muscle man wielding an axe called Torak. Wagner absolutely loved the design, but he wanted to make a couple of changes. Mainly, of course, the name. From Torak came He-Man, and of course the size of the potential figures were going to be up to 5 inches in size, which back then was a pretty big deal. Some say Wagner decided to up the size of the figures just to try and get one over on Kenner, who was of course producing the Star Wars figures at 3.75 inches. He figured, if I'm going to lose out on a big contract like that, I may as well try and better them. However, unlike most figure lines of the 1980s that were created to accompany a TV show, a comic, or a movie, the Masters of the Universe figure line was so successful it spawned its own comics, own TV show, and of course its own movie starring Dolph Lundgren. Just the Masters of the Universe figure line went on to gross a reported $700 million before sales started to plummet. But to be honest, the plummet didn't really bother me, because in the 1980s, He-Man, Master of the Universe was still a must-have figure line, and that's why I decided to add it to my list. Next up for me are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in a half shell. Salinger the rat taught them each the ninja art. Donatello, master of the staff. Leonardo, the katana blade. My gosh! Raphael, the sleeve. Don't run it at all, kids! And Michelangelo, the nunchakus.
Radical! And master of the willing pizza.
Hey, why the pepperoni and ice cream?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And yes, I did say ninja, because if, like me, you were a young English kid who were obsessed with these little green mutants, you might be more familiar with the word hero, since that is what it was changed to here in the UK after the word ninja was deemed too violent for UK children. So not only did the name get changed, but the theme tune had to be changed. Michelangelo's nunchucks were banned in the UK, so had to be airbrushed out of comics and TV shows. And not to mention that the entire first series of the Turtles we only got half of because of how much editing that they had to do. But with all that being said, luckily the action figure line went largely untouched. By 1989, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles grossed a revenue of over $500 million, largely made up by the very successful figure line. With success like that, it's no surprise that they've made my top 5 list. But from green mutants to Big metal robots?
Attack the Autobot Commander! Call in the Decepticon leader!
The Transformers, sold separately from Hasbro.
These iconic toys dominated the 1980s, with almost every child having a Transformer of some kind at some point through the 80s. However, not all is what it seems, especially when you consider that the first wave of figures were mostly just rebranded and recolored Japanese toys. Takara are a Japanese company that made all of the Generation 1 Transformers toys. However, in 1978 and 1980, Takara had two figure lines already in place in Japan that went quite unnoticed over here in the Western world. These toy lines were called Microman and Diaclone, which both featured transforming robot vehicles.
ミクロマンの新しい仲間スパイマジシャン密かにスパイ活動を続けるわかるか弟これがスパイ用のマシンドラグタイガーだわかるか弟こんな風にアーチェリーにもなるんだわかるか弟弟じゃない僕こそスパイマジシャンミクロマン
ダイヤクロンレスキュー隊員彼らの乗る車はロボットに代わり救助に活躍するメカが光るダイヤクロンカーロボット
It wasn't until 1983 when a representative from the US company Hasbro decided to visit the Tokyo Toy Show and saw these figure lines for himself. He was impressed. He was very impressed because instantly he asked Takara if they would produce transforming toys for their new line. Takara soon got stuck into making these new toys for Hasbro, and they started by rebranding and recoloring a few of their original toy lines. And when I say a few, I mean a lot. Autobot cars, Decepticons, planes, Dinobots, Constructicons, Trainbots, Omnibots, Power Dashers, Jumpstarters, and Blitzwings. In fact, the 1985 iconic Optimus Prime figure and the 1986 Ultra Magnus figure were actually just rebranded Diaclone figures.
カーロボット隊は移動基地バトルコンボイを完成させた。大型トレーラーフリーゾンエネルギーの補給整備ドック司令基地としての役割を果たす。バトルコンボイの登場でカーロボットの世界が変わる。移動基地バトルコンボイ。
ダイヤクロン
あのバトルコンボイに続きパワードコンボイ登場。キャリアカーとしてカーロボット対前進機としてさらに合体してパワーロボットに宝のカーロボットパワードコンボイ。
It didn't take too long for Takara to see which side of their bread was buttered, and in 1985 decided to solely make Transformer toys. In fact, Transformers was so lucrative for the Japanese company Takara that they decided to end their own plans for a new TV show and a new figure line, both featuring Diaclone. They just concentrated on importing the American Transformers to Japanese audiences. The Transformers figure line was first available in 1984 here in the UK. However, in a strange twist, Hasbro Europe claimed that 1984 never saw any Transformers toys, and Transformers was only introduced to the UK in 1985. However, this page of the 1984 Argos Winter Catalogue says otherwise. Whatever the truth is, all I know is that these toys were pretty unique for their day, and that makes them worthy of anybody's Christmas list back in the 1980s. Transformers may be still going strong today, however this next figure line that I want to share with you was way more short-lived but made a huge impact on kids my age in the 80s.
Mask, where illusion is the ultimate weapon.
Convert Switchblade to jet mode. Surprise, Mac Tracker. It's mayhem. Battle station. Protect the decoder, Bruce. I'm going up. Stacks ready to fire.
Mask, Switchblade, Thunderhawk, and Rhino.
Fire!
Each sold separately with action figure.
Cover me, Matt. 10-4. Sato's getting away, but you're not, Mayhem.
Mask, Switchblade, Thunderhawk, and Rhino, each sold separately, new from Kenner.
The Mask figures were released in 1985 and only ran until 1988. A total of 4 figure lines were released with a multitude of vehicles. Each of them had a transformation or a hidden feature that kids absolutely loved. Every action figure that you could purchase all came with a mask accessory, and the mask itself has all the powers and abilities that gave the characters their uniqueness. However, another pretty unique feature was that every Mask vehicle came with little plastic seatbelts. Because after all, if you're going to pit Mask against their evil foes Venom, that it's important for kids to learn that safety first. Kenner were in their 8th year of making Star Wars figures and felt pretty confident they would have another success on their hands. However, with fierce competition from G.I. Joe and Transformers, things didn't quite go their way. Kenner was forced to produce larger masks for the action figures after the smaller ones caused choking hazards in young children. Not to mention the fact that the US courts ruled that the Mask TV show was really just a half-hour advertisement for the figure lines, offering no educational value for children whatsoever. Because of this ruling, many parents at the time decided that their children could no longer watch the show, and viewing figures plummeted. Although pretty short-lived, the toys seem to be as popular now as they were in the 80s, certainly with collectors. And with a new rumoured movie in the works between Hasbro Studios and Paramount Pictures, I don't think Mask is going to be forgotten anytime soon. Next up, I just have 2 simple things to say. Bionic VI.
Metal. Die-cast. Invincible. Introducing the Bionic VI family, each implanted with bionic parts. Giving them superhuman powers. Will the evil Dr. Scarab destroy the Bionic VI? The Bionic VI. From LJN.
Now, I already know that there's some people out there thinking, who? This very short figure line was first released in 1986 by US toy company LJN Toys. LJN already had quite a successful history with their Thundercats and WWF figure lines already available on the market. With Bionic VI starting as a kids TV show which loosely related to Bionic Man and Bionic Woman, LJN decided that their figure lines needed to be just as bionic, and as such decided to make their figures out of pure die-cast metal. The figures themselves did have a clear transparent section that lit up when you pressed a button. These certainly made them stand out in a very competitive market at the time. These heavy unbreakable figures were a massive hit with kids at the time, including myself, but as you can imagine, they weren't the safest toys to have around the home, often getting thrown through windows, TVs, and just simply dropped on your foot. Only 13 figures, 1 playset, and a handful of accessories were ever released in the Bionic VI figure line. And with so many figure lines back in the 80s relying on merchandise to help promote the figures, Bionic VI just didn't create any. When I knew I wanted to make this video and I did my research, I found just 2 merchandise items with the Bionic VI logo or brand on it. One was a photo book and the other one was a dress-up outfit, none of which really tied into the series or tied into the figures at all. However, the downfall of Bionic 6 was largely due to a PR nightmare that happened in the United States. A company called MCA decided to buy LJN toys off the back of the success that they had with Thundercats and the WWF wrestling lines. Although this purchase was done before Bionic 6 was ever released, the wheels were already in motion for the toys to come out. However, the issue for MCA was that LJN didn't just have Bionic 6 in the pipeline. They also had a toy line called Entertech. Entertech was a line of realistic looking weaponry for children. Yeah, you heard that right, weaponry for children. Now yes, they were only water pistols, but they were made to look like real guns.
The look, the feel, the sound, so real. Entertainment.
The AK Centerfire, the Defender with pump action, up to 25 feet of firing power, and water clip for fast loading. And now the water grenade set. Pump them up and let them fly.
The look, the feel, the sound, so real. Entertainment.
Now unfortunately this led to police officers shooting children by mistake, thinking that they were wielding actual weaponry. Now of course, with MCA being the owners of LJN, they took all of the blame, all of the flack, and more importantly for them, all of the lawsuits related to the controversy. It didn't take that long for MCA to decide that LJN was no longer on their plans. They shifted off that company as quick as possible to video games developer Acclaim Entertainment as soon as they could, getting out of the toy industry forever. The Bionic 6 TV show was never released on DVD, Blu-ray, or even streaming services. So on one hand, you could say that the entire franchise was a failure. However, if you ask anybody my age about Bionic 6, they'll say the same thing. The figures were pretty awesome. Since I've already mentioned them twice, I'm going to end this video on one of the most successful toy lines of the 1980s.
Thunder, 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 thunder.
Introducing the evil mutant warriors, Ratero, Vulture-Man, Groom the Destroyer, battle against Lion-O and the new Thundercat allies, Hatchet-Man, Snowman, Tusker Warrior. The battle is on for the Sword of Omen.
Thunder, 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 thunder,
Figures and vehicles each sold separately from LJ.
These iconic figures made many kids' wish lists back in the 1980s after the very successful Thundercats TV show aired in 1985. The show itself was actually pretty unique to us Western viewers, because despite the writing, the production and the voiceovers all being done in the United States, the actual animation was all done in Japan, giving the cartoon an anime type style that we weren't quite used to over here. The same can be said about the figures, which were bigger, bulkier, and a little bit more unique than a lot of the figure lines that were out in that time period. The Battlematic actions meant that you could actually act out scenes that you'd seen in the TV show right in your living room. However, unlike here in the UK, if you were a young French child dreaming of pitting Lion-O versus Mumra, well, it wouldn't be Thundercats that you'd be putting on your wish list. It would be something called Cosmo Cats. Cosmocats was the title that was given to Thundercats in French-speaking countries, including Quebec, Canada. The Thundercats franchise still holds a special place with most toy collectors. I've only had a handful of these items in my possession since I've been an eBay reseller, but I just absolutely love knowing that the item that I'm selling could be going to a new potential collector. That's it. They are my 5 most loved 1980s figure lines. But I could have gone on with G.I. Joe, the real Ghostbusters, Centurions, Visionaries, Supernaturals, Rock Lords, and so many more. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It means so much for content creators like me on YouTube, and it lets me know that you actually enjoy what I'm doing. Now, I made this video because it's on a subject that I absolutely love, and I very rarely get to talk about this kind of stuff on my channel because I try to stick to reselling related content. However, this video also had another purpose. Nick and Andrea Hills were putting together a 4-day 1980s themed YouTube festival. Links to Nick and Andrea's channel as well as a full schedule on who's doing what will be in the description box below. Purpose of the 4-day event, including this very video, is so we can raise money for the British Red Cross coronavirus response. The British Red Cross are doing all that they can to try and help and support the most vulnerable people in one of our most darkest times. So now it's our turn to support them, to help them double their efforts and double their support for the people that need it the most. So please head to the description below, which you'll find Nick and Andrea's channel, a full schedule, and a link to the Just Giving page where you can donate directly yourself. We would absolutely love for you to get involved, even if it's just heading into some of the live streams just to say hello and just to give your support for the people that are spending their time to help others. If you are able to donate, that would be absolutely amazing. Absolutely every single penny counts in the fight against coronavirus. But for now, I just want to thank you for watching my video. Stay safe, stay home. Thank you.